Good evening. You're tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. PM extends his hand for cross-party ahead of the vote of confidence. And back to school, how to reopen safely. That's coming up. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has made an appeal to opposition MPs for bipartisan support during the vote of confidence in the Dewan Rakyat. In an announcement this evening, Muhyiddin said he will introduce a two-term limit for the Prime Minister and an anti-party hopping law should his government receive two-thirds support in the Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara. He said currently no member of parliament can prove majority support for a new Prime Minister to be appointed.
Saya ingin membentangkan cadangan rangka persefahaman rentas parti yang akan dilaksanakan oleh kerajaan sekiranya usul undi percaya diluluskan.
Muhyiddin said a confidence vote would allow the government to keep functioning until there was an election, which he promised will be held by the end of July 2022 at the latest, depending on the COVID-19 situation. The Prime Minister has also promised to implement a slew of changes and policies, including to implement Undi 18 without automatic registration, benefits and remuneration for the opposition leader equal to a federal senior ministers. He said he will also include opposition MPs in discussion of any bill, including federal budgets. In order to provide checks and balances, Muhyiddin said that 50% of the Parliamentary Special Select Committee will be chaired by government MPs, while the other 50% by opposition MPs. As such, Muhyiddin said he is inviting leaders of all political parties to consider his offer next week. If the bipartisan cooperation gets
What are the reactions to the PM's belated olive branch as PM's vote of confidence looms? Tonight on Consider This, we ask our guests about Putrajaya's latest political gambit. The Ministry of Education should reconsider the decision of reopening schools on September 1st. Pakatan Harapan Education Committee has urged the government to make decisions based on data and science, following guidelines provided by the World Health Organization, instead of a one-size-fits-all type of solution.
The call was made based on a poll conducted by Pakatan Harapan recently to gauge the public's preparedness in sending their children back to school amid the worsening COVID-19 situation in the country. Over 421,000 respondents who participated in the poll, conducted from August 11 to 13, were parents, teachers and school staff. Out of this number, 94.6% did not agree for school to open on September 1st. The Pakatan Harapan Education Committee is headed by former Education Minister and Simpang Renggam MP Dr. Mazli Malik. The Education Ministry had in July announced that schools will reopen in stages for face-to-face classes starting September 1st. At the same time, home-based teaching and learning will continue until August 31st. This, according to the Ministry, applies to all government schools, government-aided schools, private schools and educational institutions registered with them.
With schools set to reopen in September, how can it be done safely amid record-high COVID-19 cases? Cheryl Fernando, Director of Pemimpin GSL, says children can return to school, but it has to be done in stages, starting with schools located in green zones.
It is important not to look at it as a blanket reopening, but look at it in terms of the different types of opening that we can do. For example, opening in areas that are safer, green zones or already in Fasa 3, especially given if the teachers are fully vaccinated in these schools. The other type of reopening that we can look at is for students who all this while have not had access to data or devices and they've been struggling to continue learning online. So what teachers can do or what schools can do is to open schools for them so that they can come into school and they can meet their teachers. However, all of this can be done given that the teachers and also the staff in school, right? So the cleaners, the security guard, and everyone in that school is vaccinated so that it's safe for our students, because I think it will take a while until the students get their vaccination. So until we wait for that, there are a few ways that we can look at reopening other than a blanket opening in September.
Cheryl believes that online learning should continue to be strengthened while schools reopen in phases.
Teachers have been great at doing this. Besides just having Google Meet lessons or just lessons on Zoom, they're also looking at different ways that they can engage their students through games, getting their parents involved in their teaching and learning. So I think it cannot stop at online learning or school reopening, or come back to school, but it has to be a blend of these two measures so that the learning is strengthened and that it continues for our students.
Cheryl stressed that as frontliners, teachers' input must be taken into consideration as the government charts a long-term plan to rebuild the education system.
Listening to the teachers, finding out what is exactly the situation on the ground, what are they struggling with, I think it's something that will be greatly appreciated by the teaching community. And then coming up with a strategy that is more long-term. So the strategy doesn't end at we're going to open schools or we're going to close schools, right? But it's a more long-term strategy, a more sustainable one where we can actually see the next phase of our education system and what is to build back better the system moving forward.
The government will start vaccinating adolescents aged between 12 to 17 years old against COVID-19. Coordinating Minister for the National COVID-19 Immunization Programme, Khairi Jamaluddin, said an announcement on this plan will be made next week. Khairi tweeted that vaccinations to 12 to 17-year-olds will prioritise those with underlying medical conditions, while the ones without will come second, based on age de-escalation. Khairi added that the immunisation program for the group will be implemented based on the circular by Health Director General Dr. Nur Hisham and the latest updated clinical guidelines. According to the circular, the inoculation program for the group will be carried out at specially set up vaccination centres in hospitals, clinics and selected schools. We will go for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Allegations about people receiving ghost jabs during their COVID-19 vaccination have put Malaysians on alert, with some resorting to taking a COVID-19 neutralizing antibody test post-vaccination to confirm the presence of antibodies in their body. Minister in charge of vaccine, Khairi Jamaluddin, however, said the public is advised against going for this test as there's still not enough clinical guidelines on the subject. We speak to public health specialist Professor Dr. Sharifa Izzat to uncover some of the issues surrounding the debate on antibody tests.
There's a lot of hoo-ha at the moment, people trying to see whether they have had this antibody, specifically when there was an issue, whether you have been vaccinated enough, whether the vaccine was empty and things like that, and people started to see whether they have actually developed antibody towards this vaccine. So there's a lot of controversy surrounding it because once you are vaccinated, you might actually develop some sort of antibody. We call this the naturally occurring antibody towards that vaccine. But the problem is that some people do not develop reaction or basically antibody towards this vaccine. So a lot of people may actually find that they do not have enough antibody, or the antibody has not occurred in the body against that vaccine.
Dr. Sharifah highlights other factors to consider when discussing about the body's protection against COVID-19.
There's no recommendation for you to get that antibody test. Remember, because in the antibody response, there's also other things that comes into play, which is your T cell, your B cell, which cannot be detected through this antibody test. So there are other things that comes into the body system, immune system, if you are going to be tested, let's say after post-vaccination. So your antibody test may or not be high, and this does not mean that your body actually is not mounting a response against COVID after post-vaccination.
Vaccination is key in fighting COVID-19, and the public should not rely on antibody tests to clear any doubts about its efficiency.
In certain countries like US, CDC would not actually recommend an antibody test unless you are going around it with advice from the doctor, because if not, it will give you a false sense of either security, or it might show that you don't have enough antibody and you might feel that this vaccine is not working. So this is why it has to be guided by some sort of medical practitioner. At the moment, most of the vaccines that we have approved by WHO that Malaysia is using, basically Sinovac, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and these are the main 3 types of vaccines that Malaysia is using at the moment. All of this has been approved by WHO, and all of this has been approved by the Ministry of Health and PRA. And basically, all of this has been showing that there are a good amount of antibody response post-vaccination. So you don't really have to go and test your antibody at the moment. I know that certain labs are doing this, but it has to be guided by some sort of medical practitioner, because let's say your antibody level is low, it doesn't mean that the vaccine is not working on you.
On to the international front, the Taliban took control of the second and third biggest cities in Afghanistan, tightening their grip on the country. US, British and Canadian governments are deploying thousands of troops to help evacuate staff from the capital Kabul as the Taliban make rapid advances.
The US said it would send about 3,000 extra troops within 48 hours to help evacuate embassy staff. Australia, meanwhile, said it is working with the US to evacuate Afghans who had helped Australian troops and diplomats. Taliban captured the second biggest city of Kandahar in the south and Herat in the west after days of clashes with government forces. The militants fighting to defeat the government and impose their strict version of Islamic rule have taken control of 14 of Afghanistan's 34 provincial capitals in just a week.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news update on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I'm Fahan Asheh. We'll see you again.